Well, it was classic Monza, a bit like the race, blink and you miss it. Qualifying was a little bit like that. Lots going on all the time, enhanced by the short lap and how quick the lap is at Monza. Quite difficult on occasions to take everything in. One moment, Lando Norris is in Q2, on the bubble, slower than Gabriel Bortoleto, who's on used tyres, and just gets into Q3 on his last lap after the checkered flag has been shown to some of the cars. And Lando again on his first run in Q3, not good, but then blisteringly quick. Well, not blisteringly, hopefully in terms of the Pirellis. Very, very quick in the second phase of Q3. But Max Verstappen on the pole. As I said yesterday, the Red Bull looking a lot better with this new floor. It's kind of tuned to the low downforce circuit, but I'd be willing to bet this floor is going to stay on the car for the rest of the year or derivatives thereof. As I said on Friday, most teams bringing obviously smaller wings for Monza for the low downforce setup, but Red Bull going a step further and having a different floor as well, a revised floor, a development floor. And Max from the get-go on Friday, not complaining at all about the usual things on the Red Bull. Had a lot of traffic yesterday, disguised the lap time, as I said yesterday. So no real surprise actually to see him on the pole. 18.7. For a while out there, Lando looked as if he had pulled one out of the bag and got the pole after all those dramas in Q2 and in the beginning of Q3. But it was Max right at the end who gazumped Lando. Lando quicker than Oscar Piastri, who's P3, obviously in the other McLaren-Mercedes. Not a bad result for him on a weekend so far when Lando looks to have been slightly quicker, as predicted around Monza. Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton 4th and 5th for Ferrari. Pretty good. Pretty disappointing, I suppose, if you're a Tifosi and you're out there hoping that Charles was going to be on the pole. Bit of a strange qualifying session for Charles Leclerc because he was really quick in the first phase of Q3. Looked as if he'd be fighting for the pole when he put on his second set of soft tyres. But as he came in at the end of that first run in Q3, they said, any changes, Charles? And he said, +1 on the front flap. And then he changed his mind as he's going through the parabolic and said, no, +2 on the front flap. Now, if you look at the top speeds thereafter, no real differences, but for sure it affected the balance. And Charles, one of the few not to go quicker on that second phase of Q3. So he'll be very disappointed with that. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If they hadn't touched the car, who knows where Charles would have qualified. Anyway, they can make adjustments. Again, they'll probably go back to where they were. Lewis Hamilton not far away from Charles Leclerc. He'd be pretty pleased with that. On what is obviously a home race for him in many regards, Ferrari. George Russell, incredibly quick in Q1 on the medium tyre. Indeed, fastest of all. So much so that he didn't even have to go out and do a time in the second phase of Q1. Kimi Antonelli, also on mediums. Presumably they were thinking just save the softs at this point. Did struggle on the mediums, had to put softs on to get through into Q2. But George, very, very quick on the mediums, and disappointing for Mercedes that as he drove out of the pit lane at the beginning of Q3, he said, I'm on the softs. I thought you were going to put me on the mediums again. And you could see the faces sink at Mercedes. Now, whether there was a lack of communication, whether they overruled George, who knows? But given his pace in Q1, how quick he was on the mediums, I'm sure George would have been quicker than 19.1 on the mediums in Q3 had he had the tyres of his choice. As it was, just fractionally quicker than his teammate Kimi Antonelli, who did a very good job after a messy day yesterday. Still not looking 100% comfortable through the fast corners. He's turning in wider and later into the fast corners than he ever does, comparatively speaking, through the slower and medium speed corners. But nonetheless, very good job to be up there just behind George. Gabriel Bortoleto, absolutely superb. As I said yesterday, the Sauber Ferrari looking very, very strong. Nico Hülkenberg, very good, very quick yesterday. I did say I thought Bortoleto would be right there today, and indeed he was into Q3, and a very, very quick lap time, 19.3. Super impressed to be ahead of Fernando Alonso and Yuki Tsunoda, both of whom really should have been ahead of a Sauber Ferrari, you got to say that. Oliver Behrmann, very good in the Haas Ferrari, again substantially quicker than his teammate Esteban Ocon. Just failed to make it through into Q3. Nico Hülkenberg, as I say, also quick in the other Sauber Ferrari. Williams faded somewhat today, a bit messy as they looked a little bit yesterday, but lots of moments through the Lesmos, lots of gravel being sprayed. Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon will be disappointed with not going through into Q3, but kind of, where you would expect them to be on a circuit like this. They are not Lando Norris or Oscar Piastri, or indeed Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton. It's a different sort of driver combination, and I think it comes down to Carlos was really good when he was alongside Charles Leclerc. You had the two extremes of style, but now in the other car he's got a very quick driver, admittedly very, very soft inputs, lovely to watch, but both of them wide corner entry drivers, classic late entry drivers, wide long corners. And I think that's the result on a circuit like Monza. No surprise that. Esteban Ocon 19.7, yeah, disappointed, didn't get a toe when he wanted one, but equally never really looked like being as quick as his teammate Oliver Behrman, who did a very good job. Isaac Hadjar, Liam Lawson really struggling with the Racing Bulls. How things change. Lots of medium speed, slow speed downforce on the Racing Bulls at Zandvoort, but here at Monza, a big struggle for them. But then again, we predicted this at the start of the year. Some teams would sit fairly in the sweet spot for no apparent reason from one circuit and then fall away at the next. Here it's the Sauber Ferraris that look really good. At Zandvoort, of course, it was the Racing Bulls. Lance Stroll disappointing yet again, and the two Alpines off the pace, even though Pierre Gasly has just signed a new contract with Alpine. Feel a bit sorry for him having to do that. I guess it's just the lack of any other decent option out there. He deserves a better car than that, but anyway, let's hope when they go to Mercedes engines, no doubt they will have a better team, better car there, I'm sure. Liam Lawson last, 20.2, Isaac Hadjar 19.9. But let's now try to make some sense of what actually happened in qualifying and how Max got the pole compared with the two McLaren drivers and Charles Leclerc. Bear in mind that Charles Leclerc's lap time was done in the first phase of Q3. He did a 19.2 on his second run with that additional front flap, and so I've included that 19.0 lap. So hopefully this gives a reasonable picture of how the laps were put together and how the grid has taken its shape. As you can see, I've divided the circuit down to various key moments. These are moments of time. The numbers are kilometers an hour. They were doing at those specific moments, so we can kind of compare them and then maybe draw some conclusions of where they're going. So going down the pit straight, 3:48 for Max Verstappen. This is all on their quickest laps in Q3. So it's the pole lap for Max, second quickest lap for Lando, and so forth. So 3:48, pretty good. Charles Leclerc quickest in a straight line there in terms of aerodynamics. The Ferrari, maybe it's power as well, who knows, but certainly the Ferrari quick through the air, 3:51 compared with Max 3:48, compared with the McLaren's 3:46. And Max has a slight advantage in terms of terminal velocity before they hit the brakes going into the first chicane. First chicane, you see two numbers there. That's the speed through the right-hander and then the left-hander. Right-hander's obviously a little bit quicker than the left-hander. Interesting there, I think, how slow, relatively slow Max Verstappen is out of the first chicane. I've always made a big point of how good he is there and how good Lewis Hamilton is there as well. Max quick going in, yeah, fair enough. Short corners, breaking into a rotation point, but then again showing the sort of patience that he showed in turn 9 at Zandvoort, 73 kilometers an hour when the two McLarens are doing 76, 75, and indeed Charles Leclerc doing 75. But then they accelerate through the gears into the long right-hander where there is G, obviously, the Curva Grande. And in the middle of the Curva Grande, look at that, Max Verstappen 307 compared with the two McLarens 305, 302, and Charles Leclerc 309. So compared with where he was on the exit of turn 2, the first chicane, Max has picked up a lot of speed, and that's because he's got the car straighter than the two McLaren drivers. Charles Leclerc has done a similar thing, and because he's got a little bit more speed through the air, that shows up through the middle of the Curva Grande. So there you've got two short corner drivers, Max and Charles Leclerc, really benefiting from the work they did coming out of or in the middle of the first chicane. Now we come to the second chicane, and again, look at the two short corner drivers, Max and Charles Leclerc, how slow they are relative to the McLaren drivers going into the second chicane. That's a classic thing, again, of not wanting to rush it, just getting into a rotation point that's going to work for their exit. And let's see what happens on exit there. Max Verstappen is coming out of the second chicane at 1:31. Lando Norris 1:28 on his quickest lap. Big difference. Oscar Piastri, however, has gone in a little bit quicker than Max, but coming out at 1:34. Very, very good. And Charles Leclerc, even better, 1:11 going in slow, but very, very good exit, 1:36. So right there, you got to say Charles Leclerc looking incredibly impressive. How did he not get the pole, you might well ask? Well, let's see what happens now at the first Lesmo. Max not quick through either of the two Lesmos, both of them quick right-handers, as you can see. 2:10 for Max mid-corner, 2:17 for Lando, really quick. Oscar just slightly slower, 2:16, and Charles 2:14. Not as quick as the McLarens, but again quicker than Max Verstappen through the first Lesmo. Second Lesmo, 1:93 though for Max Verstappen, 1:90 for Charles Leclerc. Now what's happened here is he maybe overused the tyres. The tyres getting a little bit hotter. He's had a couple of moments coming out of the second Lesmo. But whatever's happening there, the Ferrari's starting to slide and he's lost speed. 1:97 however for Lando Norris, 1:95 for Oscar Piastri. That just shows you how good and how much efficient downforce the McLaren generates. Even around Monza on those two particular corners, the second Lesmo, a good example. And just to carry on from yesterday, I made the point that Oscar Piastri was getting 7th between the first and second Lesmos before going straight down to 5th, whereas Lando keeps it in 6th and then goes to 5th. Well, he was doing the same thing today. Lando was keeping it in 6th, but Charles Leclerc also doing what Oscar Piastri is doing. And one other driver I saw doing that and doing extremely well as a result was Oliver Bearman, also getting 7th just before the second Lesmo and then going back to 5th, letting the car settle a little bit. So really nice bit of driving there by Bearman. Going back to the second Lesmo, right now you're saying this has got to be McLaren's lap, hasn't it? I mean, suddenly look at Oscar Piastri, 1:95. Look at Lando Norris, 1:97. Really impressive. Anyway, they're going down the back straight now, 3:41. Ferrari again a little bit quicker through the air. The other three cars basically the same terminal velocity before they go into the Ascari chicane. And this really is where everything changes, because again, look at the two short corner drivers, Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, both going in relatively slowly, looking for the rotation point, looking to make sure that when they get the change of direction, they're not overloading the back of the car or the left front or anything like that. They're just making sure they've got everything as balanced and as stable as they possibly can. So into the Ascari section, Lando Norris 2:02, Oscar Piastri 2:09, unbelievably quick into Ascari. But then mid-corner, 2:32, Max is 2:31 mid-corner, Lando's now 2:33 mid-corner, whereas Charles Leclerc, again, I think this is the Ferrari overheating its tyres, just doesn't have the same amount of downforce as the other three cars now. Only 2:27 mid-corner, and this is where Charles Leclerc's lap falls away, and this potentially is where he was thinking, I'm going to add 2 more holes of front flap, which was a mistake, I think, because he didn't go any quicker. Anyway, have a look at the exit speed now from Ascari. This tells the story. Max Verstappen, having gone in at 1:95 compared with 2:09 for Oscar Piastri, is coming out of Ascari with the car beautifully balanced, all the load out of the car, obviously at this point, 260 kilometers an hour. Oscar Piastri's 257, Lando Norris 258. So already Max has made up that deficiency and he's now ahead of both McLarens on the exit of Ascari. And he does a nice job on the exit of Ascari. He doesn't sit on the white line the way Charles Leclerc does, all the way down the straight, but he moves it towards the middle of the road and then to the left, whereas Oscar particularly, and Lando now to some extent, not quite as much, but Oscar just immediately moves across in a diagonal. Lando almost the same, doesn't go quite as far to the left of the road. And as I said yesterday, that's putting a lot more lateral G through the engine and costing both McLaren drivers revs. And I would say, this is only my opinion, but if Lando was doing what Charles Leclerc was doing out of Ascari and sitting on that white line for as long as he could and then moving to the left, I think he would have got the pole because the difference was so small. it was something like that. The revs that are going through the engine. I don't know how many revs it would be, possibly not 100 revs even, but it certainly would have had an effect on the engine on that run all the way down to the parabolica. Speaking of which, mid-corner parabolica, Max 231, Lando 232, Oscar Piastri 234, Charles Leclerc 235. So I guess he's let the tyres cool down a bit here, and he's doing a good job then. As I go over the start-finish line, Max is the slowest over the start-finish line, but he's got the pole. 316, 319 for Lando, 318 for Oscar, and 322 for Charles Leclerc. So if you took those numbers without knowing the lap times, it would be very difficult to work out, I think, who actually had got the quickest lap. But if we have a look at the sectors, you can actually see how Max got the pole there. He was quickest in Sector 1 and Sector 3, and he was third quickest in Sector 2. So Sector 1, Max was quickest, and I think a lot of that was what he was doing out of Turn 1 towards Curva Grande and then after Curva Grande, and how much load he had out of the Red Bull and how well he was, and cleanly and lightly he was accelerating the car. Yeah, Max Verstappen quickest in Sector 1. Charles Leclerc, again, no surprise, the two short corner drivers in Sector 1. Sector 2 is all about the speed of the McLarens through the Lesmos, in my opinion. And Sector 3, Max quickest, but only just. It was very close. And as I say, if Lando, I think, had picked up a few more revs coming out of Ascari, it was a scrappy qualifying session for Lando, because all that drama in Q2 happened because on his first flying lap in Q2, he outbraked himself going into that first chicane and just missed the chicane. So at that point, they brought him into the pits again and sent him out to do one run. He had to do 2 push laps on that second set of new soft tyres. And not surprisingly, he left quite a lot of margin in Sector 1 at the beginning of Q3, just in his mind, I guess, getting a banker lap. So he didn't really have any reference points in terms of doing a high 18 as distinct from a low 19. He just had to go out and do it on his second run, which Lando's quite capable of doing. He's been around long enough to do that. But for Max, it was a different situation, because in the first phase of Q3, Charles Leclerc was quickest with a 19.0. And then right at the end of that first phase on his run, Max did an 18.9 to make him quickest. So he went into the last phase of Q3 the quickest guy on the track, and an 18.9 became the 18.7 that we see in the data here. Whereas Lando was coming from nowhere really to try and get the pole from Max. So it was a much more complicated and difficult session for Lando to manage. For all that, it was an enthralling qualifying session. A good example of why we don't need sprint races. We don't need any more artificial stuff in Formula One. This was an absorbing, captivating qualifying session. And so far as the general crowd were concerned, it was very difficult to predict what the front row was going to be. They were all rooting, obviously, for Ferrari, and it was a shame that Charles did make those changes to the front flaps, because he was quick. He was really quick, and it'll be interesting to see how they go tomorrow. I guess they'll be trying to stretch the race out, make sure above all they do their one-stop strategy. McLaren will have to make sure they don't overuse the tyres. Oscar, as I say, has that business of taking 7th just before the second Lesmo, which gives the car a little bit more room to breathe just before he's loading up the tyres again. And Lando will be looking, of course, to take the race to Max. He needs to try and win this one for sure. And on that subject, let's just have a look at top speeds, because it's going to be quite relevant to the race tomorrow. Max, in terms of the speed trap, 3:48 compared with Lando 3:45, Oscar 3:45. Charles quickest of that group, and Lewis 3:52, 3:54, Charles Leclerc. And Gabriel Bortoleto, amazingly quick, 3:55. I thought when I saw that, oh, that's got to be a tow. But then he kept doing 3:55. And Nico Hülkenberg did a 3:55 as well. So I think that's a real time for the Sauber Ferrari. So that will be a very difficult car to pass, even if you're in his TRS tomorrow. So that'll be interesting to see that one. So the Ferrari is slightly quicker than the Red Bull, which is slightly quicker than the McLarens. And George Russell is doing a sort of Red Bull type top speed as well. But put him on the medium tyre or even the hard, he's probably going to fly as well. So watch out for George in the race. So yeah, enthralling qualifying session. See what happens tomorrow. Before we go, a very quick word about the special edition, limited edition REC watch to commemorate Ayrton Senna's 1986 Lotus 98T chassis number 4. The tachymeter of this, as I say, limited edition watch includes the alley from the plenum tubes built by Team Lotus for that engine. Obviously there was a major plenum chamber, but the tubes made of alley made by Team Lotus, and that alley has now been reformed into this watch, limited edition. They're going quickly. Details in the description below this video. Ayrton raced, of course, this car in the Italian Grand Prix at Monza in '86. Wasn't a great day for him. Gearbox went on the line, hadn't qualified that well either. But in the second half of the year when Ayrton drove that car, he had 2 seconds in Germany and Hungary and finished the year with a very good third in Mexico before, unfortunately, a retirement in Australia, but some great results. And it was the last Grand Prix Lotus to be liveried in black and gold as well. So this watch commemorates that as well. So there we go. Looking forward to the race tomorrow. Big thanks to Jetcraft, to TrackNinja, to REC Watches, and to OEM Exclusive. And of course, you, the viewer, for watching. See you tomorrow.